Hello, my loves, and welcome back to episode 2 of my homeschooling vlog. I am excited to dive in with you all of the realizations, the lessons, and the blessings that we have walked through in the past 2 weeks. I'm actually recording this episode at the end of our second week of official homeschooling, and it's been a really fun journey already, as I guess anticipated it to be. Some of the things that I anticipated would arise have already. And so I'm going to share with you what I have learned and what adjustments, or rather just how I've surrendered more to the flow of homeschool, but also of our daily life. Now, if you watched episode 1, you would have heard me talk about how I suspected one of the barriers, or rather, one of the learning curves through this journey, would be the fact that my background is in education and I'm used to teaching in a school setting. So my mindset is very much still entwined with that part of my experience. And I knew that a big part of this journey would be about me learning to surrender to what I guess education, or rather learning, looks like in the environment of life. So, starting our first official week, I got a bunch of my old teaching resources out. I had a little kind of daily calendar that went through the days of the week, that went through the season that we were in, the month we were in, and also then had the different activities you would do in a school setting. Yeah, to like a daily timetable basically. And I decided I was going to get that out and put that up in the boys' bedroom because my eldest, who obviously we're starting this journey with, he quite likes knowing what's next, I suppose. He likes that timetable structure. He likes being able to know in advance what is unfolding. And I also found, obviously, in a school setting, it's really beneficial for most children. It allows them to feel safe having some understanding of what the kind of goals of that day are, or rather, what the flow of the day is going to be like. It can also be beneficial for me too, to wrap my head around, okay, these are my intentions, but I do notice that it's when we become attached to, okay, this is what is going to be, rather than allowing it to be, well, these are what my intentions are, and so that's how I want the day to flow, and if it doesn't, that is also all right. So it always comes back to surrender for me, especially. Surrender is my life mantra. Each morning, we would do the day of the week, we'd update, we'd reflect on how we didn't need to change the month, we didn't need to change the season, and I would change the daily timetable. But I suppose because contextually it didn't make a lot of sense to my son, it just wasn't a hit. It would have terms on it like English, mathematics, science, HISI, like PDHPE and all that jazz, like all the KLAs basically. And it's just not vocab he's used to, and not that he doesn't understand what maths is, and he does understand what English is. We talk about how it's learning reading and writing. It's just not a contextual understanding for him, in the sense that he doesn't sit down and do an English lesson. He doesn't necessarily sit down and do a math lesson, or he hasn't, at least in the past. So it wasn't something that really helped in his day. And if anything, it was something that rather ended up getting neglected, sort of, because I would set the intention to follow that flow, but then also surrender to what was unfolding through us. And that is more the direction I'm wanting to head in. So it was more just one of those things that gave me, I guess, clarity that I could let that go, that we could set intentions. And I feel like as he gets older, it's going to be more clear what the flow is of our homeschool day. But right now, it was something that I guess I was playing with, that I received the information from the experience that it wasn't necessary for where we are in our journey. The other thing that I really want to bring into our homeschooling journey, or rather life journey, is giving my children the grace to learn in their own way and to make mistakes, but to allow the learning to unfold in the way that best serves them. And so, in order to do that, I also have to give myself the grace to allow myself to learn the things in the way that it's best going to serve me, or rather the learning style simply that I learn through. For me, it's really allowing myself to experiment with different ways of doing things to find the path that best suits me, even if I know that the way I'm experimenting with probably already isn't for me. It's just how I have to do it. And so, one thing that was really interesting, something that I realized, was that going into it, like I said, I knew already that I was going to be coming from this more school setting mindset of how education looks or how learning looks. And so I had planned these, or more a scope and sequence of what we were going to be doing each day. So, what English concepts I wanted to focus on, maths, and so on. And what I did, and this is so interesting. I actually am almost surprised that I did this, but again, I give myself grace. I essentially started teaching from the beginning. Basically, I rather than meet my son where he was at, I met him from the start. And it's almost hilarious to me that I chose that approach to experiment with because one of my desires in homeschooling is the fact that I can meet my children where they are rather than this linear journey of learning. But that's actually what I chose to do. So, for example, if we're talking about phonics and the sounds that we learn, I have a scope and sequence of sounds that you learn. Like, for example, in a school setting, this is the one we're going to start with and the progression or the continuum of sounds. And so that's how I chose to approach it. I was like, okay, well, the first week we're going to focus on the sound A, which is obviously the letter A, and which is the letter M. Rather than it makes me laugh even just thinking about it because it's quite, like I said, it's quite humorous to me that I chose this approach rather than even taking into account the sounds that Finn already knows. Um, I just decided I'd go linear and I'd go from this point to this point. And so that first week when we were doing ah and he already knows those sounds. And it wasn't that he wasn't engaged. He was engaged, but I could sense that he was feeling as if there was no point to what we were doing because I was attempting to do it in a more structured way, for one, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But he knew those sounds. It wasn't an essential learning that he had to develop, it was an essential learning that he had. He knows what the letter A and M look like, he knows the sound they make. And he's even begun learning how to blend the sounds to sound out words. So that was really funny to me that I realized, oh, I'm choosing to start from the beginning rather than meet him where he is at. And it's funny as well because even in a school setting, obviously you do have a scope and sequence of what you're going to be learning, but you do try as much as you can, even with the large quantity of students, to kind of pre-test them to see where they're at as a group and see if you can start from wherever they're at rather than just following the linear scope and sequence. So yeah, that was a really, really interesting observation that I made. And I didn't necessarily change my way of delivering it immediately. And I'm also treating it, I suppose, as a sort of pre-test to reconfirm to me where he is at. So I can be like, okay, he knows these sounds. So we can move on to the next thing, or he knows these independent sounds, but he's having trouble blending them or rather hearing them, like his phonological awareness might need developing. So that was really fun. I loved that realization. As I said, it made me laugh. It also allowed me to give myself grace, which is something that I want to be able to do for my children. And I genuinely do believe if we want to be able to do these things like have compassion or patience for our kids, we have to be able to have it for ourselves. And so over the last 2 weeks, what the kind of subtle change has looked like was from me going from each day, we need to sit down together and explicitly learn this content, to, oh, okay, what are the children interested in today? And how does that then tie in with the curriculum? Or how can I expand upon that to connect the dots? And again, when you are really present with them, you realize how easy that truly is. Like the first week, I was looking at doing a science unit with them that was around the weather because we've been having some really great weather at the moment. Like it's summer here, there's lots of storms at the moment. We have really windy days and then really still days. We get to talk about humidity and dryness, all the things, right? It's actually a really good time of year to do a weather unit. And so I decided I would start with that unit as well because my boys are also very interested in the weather. So I've really allowed it to be extending off their own curiosity. We've had some storms. We already talk about, lightning. We talk about observation, something that was really beautiful. And like, this is that kind of progression from the beginning of the first 2 weeks. I wanted to be like, okay, we'll sit down and we'll have this discussion that wasn't spontaneous, that wasn't an extension off of what was already happening, but rather me being like, okay, let's talk about the weather. Like, that was just felt so inauthentic and not something, again, it's this funny paradox. This is not how we need to deliver it here. This is not how we need to approach it here. This is not how I want to approach it here. So it was just a full 2 weeks of being like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I can do it differently and giving myself grace again. By the end of the 2 weeks, I was much more surrendered to allowing the authentic curiosity flow through, the authentic learning to take place. I know that there was a day at the end of the 2 weeks where we spent hours outside before lunch because it was just such a beautiful day. And we just sat there on our like little play equipment thing and just talked. And the things that they said to me, we then extended upon. One of my children started talking about a friend that he had had who had said some not nice things to him. So we extended upon that, and talked about how it made you feel. Okay, well, what are the qualities of a good friend? What do you try to do to be a good friend? And this all ties in with a PDHPE unit. And we talked about, what we can do when our friends are maybe not being the nicest, or maybe reflecting on when we're not being the nicest and how to approach that. So that just sprung out of just conversation. And because it was something that they were interested in at that time, they wanted to dive deeper in it. They wanted to explore, the ins and outs of what makes a good friend. Whereas if I was to approach that in a school, it would be like, okay, this is a planned lesson that I'm doing. I'm going to sit down and say, okay, what makes a good friend? Like, or we might listen to a story first that ties into it, and then we talk about it. But understandably, because that's how you have to approach it in a school context, it's very, well, it's just not spontaneous and it doesn't arise from the beauty of the present moment, which I'm all about presence. So we got to sit there, we got to allow that conversation to arise, and we got to dive deeper into that conversation. And then we moved on to the weather because one of my boys said, what a beautiful day it was. And so then I got them to sit there and I said, let's do something fun. We closed our eyes and I said, I want you just to listen and don't say what you're hearing, but just listen to what you're hearing. And, when we opened our eyes, we talked about how we heard the birds singing. We talked about how we could hear the wind. Actually, my eldest said to me, he's like, I can hear the wind. I said, well, wait a minute, how can you hear the wind? And I always come from the side of, oh, I'm curious. Like, I'm always coming from the approach of, I don't actually know, you tell me, so that it allows them to go dive deeper into their thoughts and to like have more curiosity within themselves and what they're exploring. And so he talked about how he heard the wind because he could hear the trees and he could hear the leaves moving on the trees. And so we did that activity. Then we closed our eyes again and we talked about what we could feel. And again, it kind of was the wind, but we were coming from a different approach. Well, how can you feel it? What does it feel like? Oh, I can feel the sun. How can you feel the sun? What does it feel like? And then we did the next part with our eyes open. But again, it was the important we were being silent and we were just having our eyes open and looking. And then we talked about what can you see? We talked about what the weather was like on that day. And I said, would you say it's a sunny day or something else? And, it was funny. My eldest was like, well, it's definitely sunny because the sun's out and there's lots of blue sky. and there's not many clouds. And my other son said, well, no, I can see clouds over there. And we talked about how you would determine if it's a cloudy day or not. There were just so many little things in that couple of hour period that we dived into science, that we dived into PDHPE, that we dived into English, that we even dived into maths. And on our way back to the house, we'd had a storm the night before. So, we went and checked the rain gauge. And, it just all was so beautiful that it just came from the moment. And then we could then go and sit and do some activities that extended upon that, and then do like a worksheet I might have printed that was a cut and paste activity of like, oh, okay, well, here's all the t titles like sunny, windy, stormy, whatever. Can you cut the symbol for it and paste it where it belongs? So it was really fun to watch that transition. And I know that it's just going to be a continual transition over the next couple of years, really, because it's going to be forever changing. But it's going to be where we get to allow the present moment and their actual authentic curiosity and interest to then inform our learning. And that's how I truly want it to be. But I also have to learn how to allow that to take place. I also found because, obviously everyone around us, the big topic of conversation with my eldest is school. And he has a lot of friends who are going to school, which, is a really lovely experience for him to have, to understand that there are so many ways to approach life in general. But as the topic of conversation is school, he's very aware that, oh, okay, then what we do from now is school work. Because, it is a conversation with relatives, with family, with friends. And so I noticed the past 2 weeks he started really going into this perspective. And I could see that he's just playing with it, right? This is the thing. Our children love to understand the world experientially. I mean, I think we all do. It's the most authentic way to experience the world. So he's been playing with this perspective that, oh, I hate schoolwork. Oh, I hate doing schoolwork. It's boring. Now, I can see when he's doing it, there's a lightness to it. He's not genuinely like, I hate this. And like, there's no anger behind it. There's almost like a humor behind it. I can see when he's saying it, he has a bit of a smile on his face. And at first, I was like, I need to fix this. I don't want him to hate what we're doing. I don't want him. And then I was like, I can also allow him to experiment with saying those things and feeling that way. And I can offer my guidance. And what this did, it was such a beautiful blessing, this experience of him saying, oh, I hate schoolwork, Mom. I hate doing this. I could see that experiment he was having with himself and with, oh, how's my mum going to react if I say these things? What it did was gave me an opportunity to acknowledge how he was feeling, of course, always, and then offer him a perspective switch. I know for me, for the last, like I said, I think, oh gosh, 8 years or more that I've been on this rather spiritual journey, there are a lot of perspectives or universal truths that I've always pondered. How do I deliver this to my children? Because I always saw it to be something that was really profound. And I was like, well, how do I teach them about, the law of attraction? And how do I teach them about, mindset stuff? And I never, like, I was like, oh, it's such a profound concept. How do I simplify it? And then I was given an opportunity to do it. And when you are talking to a child, you do tend to simplify your language somewhat. And so it was actually so much easier than I thought just by simplifying my language and knowing that it's going to be an evolution of understanding. Just like you might teach a kindergartner, for example, about weather, it would be very different than the way you approach it with a child who's in year 6 or higher. It's going to be an evolution of understanding, an evolution of the way, the depth you dive into it. And so, he was saying these things, and I just acknowledged it and accepted it, and also was aware that he was in himself, he's like kind of experimenting with saying these things, and there's a lightness to it because, like I said, I can see that he smiles when he says it, and it's not something that he's fully feeling, but rather he's just playing around with that personality. And so I offered him the perspective, and we've been talking about this for a while, where what you think can create your reality, where the thoughts that you choose to believe can impact and influence how you experience life. And so I said to him, that there are things that I don't like doing. I said, I don't like washing up. It's not my favorite thing to do. However, if I know that it's something that I want to do because we want clean dishes to eat our food off of. But if I stood there and did the washing up and was saying, oh, I hate washing up, it's so boring while I was doing it, how do you think I'm going to feel? And we talked about how that feels. If I'm saying I hate it, it's so boring, it feels yuck. It doesn't feel good. I don't feel happy. I don't feel peaceful. I don't feel joyful. I feel sad, angry, bored, all the things. And then I said, but if I choose to see the positive aspect in doing the washing up, that in fact it means that we've just eaten delicious food, that I've got to just share delicious food with my family, that I'm going to have clean plates and cups and knives and forks and everything to use to eat my next delicious meal. I said, that feels better. And I changed my dialogue and showed him how I could focus on what I was grateful for in that task and how, oh, actually, that makes it feel a lot better. And so the thoughts that I'm choosing to think and the words that I'm choosing to speak can actually influence how I feel. And so we did the example. I said, okay, you say those things like I hate it, it's boring, and try and do it. And then we talked about how he felt doing it. And I said, okay, well, what could you say instead? We talked about, for example, he was doing handwriting. I said, do you want to be able to write letters? Do you want to be able to write stories? Do you want to be able to write X, Y, and Z? And he knows that we've already spoken about the purpose of handwriting in that we want others to be able to read our writing. We want to be able to read our own writing and we want to be able to write. And so we shifted our language and the thoughts we were choosing to think in that moment to, oh, I'm so glad I get to do handwriting so that I can write letters. I'm so excited to be able to write letters to people that I love. I'm so grateful that and we kept going down that snowballing path. And then we talked about how that felt. Now, I'm not saying that from that point onwards, he was like, oh, I'm going to do this now all the time. But I will tell you that a couple of days later, he was doing a handwriting page. And I was in the kitchen making morning tea while he was doing it. And he was sitting there, he was focused, he was doing his handwriting. And then he started saying out loud, but quite enough that, he didn't want to, he wasn't talking to anyone, he was talking to himself. He was saying, I love doing handwriting. I'm really good at handwriting. I love doing handwriting. I love doing my schoolwork. And it was so beautiful because, of course, I don't want to negate the way he feels. And I want him to understand that it's okay for him to feel the way he feels, but also that you can choose a different path and you can make those tasks more enjoyable if you want. It is your choice. So it was so beautiful then to see that in action with him. And there has been obviously times between there and now where he has said again, oh, I hate it's boring. And that's fine. I find that the more I resist how he's feeling and push back against it, the more he goes with it, the more he dives into that, well, I really hate it. If I allow him to feel the way that he feels and also invite him, let him know that there is another path and you don't have to take it, but it's there. It's just a really beautiful, natural way of letting him choose something different because ultimately he does. So that was a beautiful blessing. And so that was a beautiful blessing. And obviously it challenged me. I'm not going to say it was easy because, naturally when we have something that we're expanding into, we have any fear and resistance kind of reflected back to us through other selves, through external, what we perceive of to be external experiences. So for me, there are times where I might start to doubt, like, oh, what if I'm making the wrong choice? Which I know that that's not true. And I know that that's just, some limiting belief that I have. But having him then say things like, oh, I hate schoolwork, it does trigger that part of you that's like, did I make the right choice? Like, I don't want him to hate this. I don't want, but we also have to take a breath as adults. We also have to acknowledge how we feel, and we also then have to choose. And so I did get to choose in that moment. So it's not just giving him the gift of, this mindset work, but also me too. Now, I wanted to share with you two resources that we do use that I'm finding really enjoyable and really valuable. The first one, we've actually been using it for quite a while now, and it's on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel, and it's all free directed drawings. They have a preschool section, and then it obviously becomes more and more advanced. It's called Art for Kids Hub, and I will put the link to that YouTube channel in the description box. And there is a whole playlist that we've actually dove into previously, but I'm now choosing others that, like, for example, if we were doing the letter A and they have a whole playlist of alphabet-based preschool level directed drawings. It's a really family-centered YouTube channel. The man who runs it, he actually does the drawings with his own children. So he models it as, I guess, like, the art guide, and then his children model it as well for their ability level. And it's really beautiful. Like I said, we've been using it for at least 12 months. And so, that first week we were focusing on the letters A and and we'd already done the A, which was an alligator. And so that week we chose the which was a mouse. And it takes you through step by step. And we just pause the video when we've watched a step so we can do that step together. And it's really fun. It's a great, simple art activity. I know that my eldest son, he's not super into art at the moment, but he loves activities with instructions. He loves activities with directions, and directed drawing for him is his favorite way to approach art. And like I said, I'll put the link to that YouTube channel in the description box. No, I'm not affiliated with them at all. It's just a resource that I actually think is really great. And even if your children do go to school, obviously you can still let them do that. And it's another way too of, I guess, using screen time that is more educational, because I know that for many of us, it's the balance of learning how to allow our children to use screens in a balanced and healthy way. And I mean, we're all learning as we're going, right? We've never had this before in the history of our experience, at least. It's like, we're raising children with screens from the get-go. So we're just all doing our best. But this is one way that you can be like, okay, hey, you can watch this on YouTube Kids, sorry, and this is like something you can give them the tablet. We're going to pick a directed drawing. You can pause it, and it's an effective way to do it, I feel. The other resource I wanted to share with you, this is something more physical. We've been using these. They're write and wipe sleeves. That's what they're called. This is an A4 one. And essentially, I just print out a sheet and slide it in the top. They're pretty like quality. It's nice and thick. And for this one, I've got like a little kind of path tracing handwriting type sheet. And my son can just, sit down anytime he's bored, first thing in the morning. We give him these. You can put one on the back, it's double-sided, and a whiteboard marker, and he just goes for his life. I've been putting like maths ones in with missing numbers. So, another activity we had was there was a dinosaur and dinosaur eggs, and it had numbers from 1 to 20, but some of them were missing. He had to fill in the missing numbers. This one is a tracing one. It's a very great, simple, easy activity. And then you can keep those sheets. Obviously, you don't have to reprint something, put them on rotation. That's what I do with our toys. That's what I do with our sheets. So I'll give him those sheets for a week. I'll take them out. I'll put a different printed sheet in, and we'll just put them on rotation, and he'll get to play with them. And even my middle son, he isn't super into doing the actual sheet, he'll just draw pictures on it, which is still okay. And it wipes off quite easy. So I've got a link in the description to where you can purchase those from Amazon. And they're really great. I really recommend them. It is an affiliate link as well. So if you do purchase them through Amazon, I would love for you to purchase them through my link because it just support me in continuing to do this channel, but also just getting to be home with my children and homeschool. So thank you for joining me this week. I hope that you got some value out of what I shared. Feel free to like if you like this video, subscribe if you want to be kept up to date with when I do new videos, and also to comment if you have any questions. If you have any comments, maybe it's just something that you're doing that's similar, that is working or not working for you, something that you're challenged by or something that has worked really well for you. I'd love to hear it. And also, if there's anything that you want me to speak on, obviously I'll be doing these weekly homeschool vlogs, but I'm happy to do separate ones just on specific topics, on how we approach certain things. We're just doing what we feel is best for our family and also learning as we go. So please do leave a comment if you do have any comments or questions. Otherwise, I'm sending you all my love and I hope you have a magnificent now.